The following review contains significant plot spoilers. Please watch at your own risk.
Excuse me.
¡Vamos rápido! ¡Despegarlos todos! ¡Vamos rápido, que no se puede escapar! ¡Corred! ¡Ahora lo tenemos ahora! ¡Cógelo!
Whoever you are, you outstayed your welcome. Come on.
After Moonraker's release in 1979, many fans and critics alike thought that the approach of making Bond films more campier wasn't working all too great. The producers at Eon agreed and decided to bring Bond back to his roots, even if it meant lower box office sales. Keep in mind that Moonraker was the most financially successful Bond film at the time, and would hold that accolade until 1995. Nevertheless, the producers went back to basics and made the next Bond film, titled For Your Eyes Only. This review may be pretty long because I have a lot to say about this one. At some point between 1999 and 2001, I had my first exposure to James Bond. I must have been about 6 when I got a Nintendo 64 for Christmas. That N64 happened to come with a game. That game was none other than GoldenEye, based on the 1995 Bond film of the same name. At that point, I had no idea that this suave secret agent had been a part of the world since way before I was born. I also didn't know that there was a film series. I thought that the character was made up for the video game. Sometime after that period, I had my first exposure to the cinematic Bond. I began seeing commercials for a film called The World Is Not Enough, which was released in 1999. I instantly recognized Pierce Brosnan as James Bond. However, I never did see the film until it was released on VHS later in 2000. The first Bond film I ever saw would forever be special to me. One day I was sitting in the living room when either my mom or dad put a movie on for me. It was an unusual movie to me, but it caught my attention. I fondly remember a bad bald guy in a wheelchair who was trying to hurt some guy. I asked my mom who this poor man holding onto the side of a helicopter was. She responded saying, "That's James Bond." For Your Eyes Only is the 12th official Bond film and was released in 1981, starring Roger Moore as James Bond yet again. The film opens up with the usual gun barrel. But wait, what's up with that awesome music? John Barry didn't compose the score for this film, and it shows quite easily, but we'll talk about that aspect later. Nevertheless, the gun barrel music is freaking awesome and is easily my favorite in the series. After that, we get the pre-title sequence, which shows Bond visiting the grave of his late wife, Tracy. This is a spectacular touch and shows that this film isn't going to be like Moonraker. After that, he is interrupted by an apparent assignment and is ordered to board a helicopter back to MI6. Bond gets in and the pilot takes off. The camera then changes and shows us a bald man with a white cat in a wheelchair. Yes, that's right, it's Blofeld. This time, though, you don't see his face, and his body is provided by John Hollis, while his voice is provided by Robert Riety, who did the voice for Largo and Thunderball. Also, due to licensing issues with the character, his name is never mentioned. Blofeld kills the pilot with a control panel and takes control of the helicopter remotely. Blofeld flies Bond around for a bit while Bond tries to make it out of the helicopter and into the pilot's seat. Bond eventually does and pulls the cord that's allowing Blofeld to control the helicopter. You can easily guess what happens next. Bond picks up Blofeld in his wheelchair with the side of the helicopter while Blofeld pleads with his life. Bond then drops him inside a big smokestack, killing the character for good. Now, while this may sound like an epic opening and return of the character, It is ruined with the comedic quips by Bond to Blofeld and the fact that Blofeld gets such an unsatisfactory death. This man killed Bond's wife. Oh well, it's still a pretty enjoyable intro to the film, I guess. I guess too, since it was the first glimpse that I got of the cinematic Bond, that it has a soft spot in my heart. I read that the quick death of Blofeld was meant to be aimed towards Kevin McClory, who owned the rights to the character. The producers showed McClory that they didn't need Blofeld to make a good Bond film. After the PTS, we get the title song sung by Sheena Easton. I know that a lot of people don't really like the song, and I don't know if it's from nostalgia or not, but I still think that it is one of the best title songs in the series. It works well as an instrumental piece with the slow parts of the film and is quite memorable. After the song, we get the basic plot of the film. Bond is ordered to retrieve an ATAC device from a sunken spy boat before the Soviets do. This ATAC device can order attacks by submarines, which is vital that Bond obtains it. And with that, you have the plot. Very basic and nowhere nearly as silly and impossible as Moonraker's plot. As a fellow YouTube reviewer has said before, sometimes it's the Bond films with the basic and simple plots that end up being the most enjoyable. I agree 100%. Anyways, unknowns to Bond and his superiors, General Gogol, again played by Walter Gotell, is trying to get the ATAC as well. This kind of contradicts him as an ally to Bond, like he was in the previous films, but it's a pretty interesting idea. The British send a marine archaeologist to find the sunken wreck in the Ionian Sea, but he is murdered along with his wife by a Cuban hitman named Hector Gonzalez, played by Stefan Khalifa. Bond is sent to Spain to find out who hired Gonzalez, but is captured at his villa. He quickly escapes after someone assassinates Gonzalez with a crossbow and actually runs into the assassin. This assassin happens to be the Bond girl of the film, Molina Hemlock, played by Carol Bouquet. She also happens to be the daughter of the murdered marine archaeologist, which explains her need for revenge. The two escape in quite an unconventional vehicle, Molina's Citroën 2CV, after Bond's new Lotus Esprit gets blown up. It's little things like that that make this film stand out. Bond has to somehow survive with just his wits and not a gadget-laden car. Bond and Molina escaped after an incredible car chase, and Bond later identifies the man who paid off Gonzalez as Emile Leopold Locque, played by Michael Goffard. Bond later travels to Italy, where Locque is expected to be, and meets contact Luigi Ferrara, played by John Marino. Ferrara takes Bond to meet a Greek businessman and informant Eris Christados, played by Julian Glover, who tells Bond that Locque is working for Milos Colombo, Christados' former partner, played by famed Israeli actor Topol. After the meeting, Bond agrees to take Christados' protégé Bibi to a biathlon course. Bibi is a young figure skater and is definitely portrayed as underage, yet she still wants to sleep with Bond. I like the little part where Bond clearly denies her, tells her to put her clothes back on, and that he'll buy her an ice cream. You just gotta love Roger in that scene. When they get to the biathlon, Bond is chased by various henchmen, including a tall, blonde East German biathlete named Erich Kriegler, played by John Wyman. A very long and exciting ski chase ensues, which happens to be quite possibly my favorite chase sequence in the entire series. It also helps that the music that plays behind this chase scene is freaking sweet. Afterwards, Bond escapes and he goes and meets Bibi along with Ferrara to bid her farewell as she is leaving for Greece. After Bond goes back to his car, he finds Ferrara dead, holding a pin of a dove which is apparently the symbol of Colombo. Bond suspects that Colombo is of course behind it and goes to Corfu to find him. Bond meets Christados in a casino and asks him how to meet with Colombo, not knowing that their conversation is being recorded by Colombo himself. Colombo is seen in the casino arguing with his mistress, Countess Liesel von Schlaff, played by Cassandra Harris, and Bond later offers to escort her back home. A cool thing to note is that Cassandra Harris is the late wife of Pierce Brosnan, who would eventually play James Bond. Bond and Liesel go to her place on a beach and spend a romantic evening together. In the morning, they take a walk along the beach, but are ambushed by Locque and his men. Liesel ends up getting killed when Locque runs her over in a buggy. Before Locque can kill Bond, Colombo and his men scare him off and capture Bond. Bond meets with Colombo and finds out that Locque really works for Christados, who is working with the KGB to get the ATAC. Bond goes with Colombo and his men to one of Christados' opium warehouses in Albania, where Bond sees naval mines suggesting that the sinking of the spy boat wasn't an accident. The base ends up getting destroyed, and Bond chases Locque and kills him in what is Roger Moore's darkest scene as Bond. As Locque is in his car, teetering at the edge of a cliff, Bond approaches him and throws the dove pin that was left of Ferrara at him. He then coldly kicks the car off of the cliff. This is easily one of the most iconic scenes in the series and is very dark for Roger Moore's Bond. Apparently Moore himself was very reluctant to even shoot the scene. Anyways, Bond goes back to Greece and meets up with Molina again, where they locate and recover the ATAC from the sunken wreck, but are quickly captured by Kristatos when they surface. Kristatos takes the ATAC and keel hauls Bond and Molina through shark-infested waters and sharp coral reefs. Bond and Molina escape this over-elaborate assassination attempt and discover Kristatos' rendezvous point as St. Cyril's. Bond, Molina, and Colombo and his men go to St. Cyril's and watch Bond as he mountain climbs his way to the mountaintop monastery, where Kristatos is. This whole sequence is pure gold and contains an extraordinary stunt with Bond falling off of the cliff, suspended by only one cord. Bond, of course, makes it to the top and lets the others up via a lift. Eventually, Bond has a showdown with Eric Kriegler and kills him by knocking him out of a window and off of the cliff. Meanwhile, Colombo chases after his rival Kristatos. Bond retrieves the ATAC and stops Molina from killing Kristatos after he surrenders. Kristatos then tries to kill Bond with a hidden switchblade, but Colombo throws a knife at him, killing him and saving Bond. General Gogol then arrives to collect the ATAC, but Bond chucks it off the cliff, destroying it so that neither side can have it, and declaring détente. Gogol gives him a smile and leaves without any consequences being dealt. The film ends on a comedic note with Margaret Thatcher, who was British Prime Minister at the time, phoning Bond and congratulating him with his mission, only to end up talking to Molina's parrot. This is definitely my favorite portrayal of Roger Moore's Bond. He really proved that he could do a serious Bond film for once. That isn't to say that there isn't any comedy in the film, because in fact there's quite a bit. The only thing is that it is done well and not over the top, with the exception of the PTS. Moore does look older at this point, but not completely unbelievable as Bond. I should also point out that Moore wasn't originally planning on doing this film, which explains the small build-up to showing Bond at the beginning. Personally, after seeing this as a child, I couldn't picture anyone else doing it, and for that I salute you, Roger Moore. Julian Glover plays the bad guy Kristatos and does a good enough job of what he's given. We don't get too much build-up to him being the villain, as it is made out that Colombo is, which is a neat plot twist. The scenes we do get with Kristatos as the bad guy are very memorable, and he portrays a realistic villain. I only wish that Kristatos got more screen time, as Glover is a great actor. Nevertheless, he makes it as one of my top 10 favorite Bond villains. Moneypenny and Q return with M being left out due to Bernard Lee tragically passing away before he could film his scenes. In his place we get British Minister of Defence Sir Frederick Grey, played by Geoffrey Keane, and Chief of Staff Bill Tanner, played by James Villiers. It is mentioned in the film that M is away on leave, which is a nice touch since they don't completely forget about him. M would return in the next film, although played by a different actor. I should also mention that Bond gets no gadgets whatsoever, which is a nice touch for once. We get two allies this time, Ferrara and Colombo. Although Ferrara doesn't get much to do, he is a likable character, which makes his death a little saddening. Colombo, on the other hand, is an incredible ally and is nearly my favorite ally in the series, only being surpassed by Karen Bay in From Russia with Love. Topol gives a very charismatic and memorable performance as Colombo and ends up making him a very likable guy. I would have liked to see more of this guy in future Bond films, maybe as a regular contact like Felix Leiter or something. Speaking of Felix Leiter, we haven't seen him in ages. We will see him again though, so don't worry. It just won't be for a while. We get a lot of henchmen in this film, some major, some minor. The ones that stick out are Locque and Kriegler. I'm going to completely surprise everyone and say that Locke is one of my favorite henchmen in the series. The guy looks mean as hell, and the funny part is that he doesn't even talk in the whole film. He just has a memorable look to him. Also, his death scene is great. Kriegler is basically a Red Grant or Hans type of character. He's tall, blonde, and seems indestructible. He is nowhere near as memorable as Red Grant, though. Our main Bond girl is Molina Hemlock, played by gorgeous French actress Carole Bouquet. Many people call her performance in this film bad, but honestly I thought she did a great job with the role. She proved she could kick some ass with the crossbow, and she certainly has the looks. Other girls in the film include the Countess Liesel and Bibi. I've heard many complaints about Bibi and how she is annoying, but that's just how her character is supposed to be. Personally, I don't like her or hate her. She's just there. Longtime editor of the Bond films, John Glenn, would be promoted to director for this film, and boy did he do a fantastic job. Glenn is definitely my favorite director so far in the series, and definitely left his stamp on the franchise. John Barry wasn't available to do the score at the time, so the producers managed to get Bill Conti to do it. Conti is most famous for scoring the Rocky films. Reaction to his score have been highly polarized. People either despise it with a passion, or love it with a passion. Surprisingly, I'm with the latter. I honestly think that this film has the best score in the entire series, with utmost respect to John Barry. I just love the 80s feel to it, and while it sounds dated, I just can't help but love it. Here are some examples of the music featured in the film. Whether you hate it or love it, you can't deny that Conti's score was truly unique for the Bond series. After a few mundane and silly plots, we get one that is genuinely interesting and quite realistic for a change. It's certainly a sigh of relief, that's for sure. There are many great and memorable scenes in this film, such as the murder of Molina's parents, the identigraph scene, and pretty much any scene with Colombo. The action sequences rank among the best in the series, with all of them being highly exceptional except for maybe the underwater ones. The mountain climbing sequence is exhilarating, while the ski and car chases are well choreographed and have tremendous music. The locations are all wonderful, with the snowy scenes at Cortina in Italy and the rural countryside of Corfu in Greece. The true highlight, however, is the monastery in Meteora, Greece, which serves as the climax of the film. Apparently the producers went through a lot of trouble to film there, but it was well worth it in the end. If you haven't noticed yet in this review, I have had nothing but positive things to say about this film. I don't know if it's because it was the very first Bond film I ever saw, but even if I seen it last, I think I would have loved it still. I do agree that there are some slightly bad things about this film, but for some reason they never really affected me all that much. I've also seen many Bond fans rank this consistently as one of the best. I certainly agree. Thunderball and On Her Majesty's Secret Service may possibly be on the same level as For Your Eyes Only quality-wise, but this film just has that edge of being the first one I ever saw, and therefore I am proud to call this film my absolute favorite in the entire series. I am proud to award this film a perfect 10 out of 10. Besides Blofeld's poor death scene, I really don't have anything bad to say about this one. I guess I should go over my top 5 favorite things about this film, though. I like the return of a more realistic and serious Bond film, and Roger Moore proved he could pull one off. I love the action scenes in this film. Pretty much every single one is immensely entertaining. I love the score of the film. It is easily my favorite in the series. Kristatos and Locque remain as two of my favorite bad guys in the series. And lastly, Colombo makes a very memorable and fantastic ally. I know this review is pretty long, but since it's my favorite in the series, I had to do it justice. I always have a blast rewatching this film every year, and this year was no exception. Next week we will look at the next Bond film, which marks the return of the silly comedic Bond. It also is quite a provocative name. Anyways, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.